This is draft season. My name is John Schmelk. The usual crew is with you, Tony, Pauline, Eric Crocker, as we continue to track the college football season leading up to the NFL draft. And of course, it's all brought to you by Tommy Hilfiger, a PVH brand and an official partner of the New York Football Giants. And a reminder, folks, this is not a Giants podcast. This is a draft podcast. So it's focused on draft prospects, not necessarily anything to do with the Giants, despite what's behind me. So, guys, let's talk about the weekend of football. Tony, when we kind of talked about what we were going to do for this show, you said, Big Ten schedule this week, not too good. You know, Michigan, Rutgers, Northwestern Ohio State, Penn State was in a blowout game too, right, if I'm not mistaken.
Indiana.
So, SEC time, Alabama, LSU. I watched that game start to finish on Saturday night. Hell of a finish, and I know we got the loss, but boy, that play that Bryce Young made at the end of that game to scramble outside to make that touchdown pass, pocket awareness, ability to scramble, to throw, accuracy, mobility, quick release. You know, he keeps checking boxes for me every time I watch him.
Bryce Young always delivers for Alabama. I mean, and that is what it is. In the loss to Tennessee, he drove the team down for a game-winning field goal. The kicker missed the field goal. Against LSU, a game that they were behind all along, basically he brings the team back. He gets the team tied. Brings the team down. They kick the field goal tie. They score the first possession in OT, but LSU, the Alabama offense can't stop the LSU offense for that 2-point conversion. He always delivers. I mean, as we've talked about before on this podcast, he is just an incredible, intellectually intelligent quarterback that has almost a clairvoyance when he is behind center, when he is in the pocket, when he was moving around behind the line of scrimmage, to know what's going on downfield and to make the right decisions, whether it's downfield or whether it's going to the check down receiver or check down the target that's 5 or 6 yards off the line of scrimmage. I mean, if you like guys who really get it and you don't need that 60-yard bomb down the field, Bryce Young, it's beautiful to watch. I mean, it really is, without being overly dramatic. He just delivers time and time again. And again, he delivered for Alabama on Saturday night. The defense just couldn't hold him. Just like against Tennessee, it was the field goal kicker who couldn't knock it through the uprights.
Yeah, it was very interesting watching them. I think the first half, you saw a little bit of up and down, maybe pressing a little bit. The offensive line wasn't holding up their end of the bargain very well. He was kind of running around. He missed some throws, threw a bad interception in the end zone. And I'm like, man, that's very uncharacteristic of Bryce Young, just the way it looked. But I thought as the game went on, he started to settle down a little bit more and just really understand like what was at task. And you got to go out there. You got to be a guy. You got to be more of a playmaker. And I think he started to do that. John, you talk about that touchdown he had towards the end of the game that put his team in position to potentially win that game. And, to kind of get out of the pocket, make guys miss, and then throw the ball. Obviously, got wide open, but just how he got to that point. It was a lot of magic he was doing. And I've called him this, and other people have kind of seen some of the similarities just in their style of play. But, I call him skinny Russell Wilson, because some of the stuff he does, it looks reminiscent of that. Again, maybe not the biggest of arms, but I think more times than not, you can count on him to be accurate and understand where to go with the ball. And you see that plus athleticism as well. Probably would ideally like a little bit more size, because even with Russell Wilson or even guys like Kyler Murray, who aren't like tall, they at least got a little bit more thickness to them. You don't really get that with Bryce Young. So, how will he hold up at the NFL level, et cetera? Maybe a little bit more difficult to run away from NFL guys. But overall, man, what he's doing right now, I think he kind of solidified himself clearing the way as the QB1 in this class, and didn't come away with a win. But I don't think it was because of him. A lot of it had to do with the defense. And their struggles really kind of was stopping Jaden Daniels on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, and look, he can do that off-schedule stuff like Murray, like Wilson, but I feel like he's on time with the ball. Like, he's so structured. Like Tony has made, I think, Tony, you've made the Drew Brees comparison before, right? Where he knows where the ball's supposed to go. He gets it out on time, on schedule, while, Wilson and Murray do more of the running around ad-lib stuff. Young's on time. Like, and when he has to, he can, but otherwise I could see him in the NFL sitting in the pocket and living as a pocket passer if his offensive line lets him, which, by the way, the Alabama offensive line isn't letting him do that, which is even more impressive. He's doing this under adverse, circumstances. And Tony, I think to Croc's point, for me, I've seen enough of CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, and I know the physical attributes are very different. I don't care if I'm picking a quarterback. I'm picking Bryce Young first right now.
Yeah, and the other thing about Bryce Young is let's not forget brand new set of receivers this year. I mean, he doesn't have those two dominant receivers that he had a year ago that C.J. Stroud has at Ohio State. These are brand new receivers he's throwing to, and it's like he hasn't missed a beat. So that's something else you got to factor in. Whereas C.J. Stroud, in my opinion, has been a bit disappointing. He hasn't shown progress in his game this year, or shown the progress that I hope. I've watched Ohio State a lot. My daughter goes to Ohio State. I send them a lot of money every year for my daughter to go there. So, and my wife, who doesn't care about football, is now a big Ohio State fan. And I watched them a lot before, but Ohio State with C.J. Stroud, they're very slow off the snide. I mean, you saw it against Northwestern. If you watch the game the week before against Iowa, you look at the final score. They beat the living crud out of them. But the first half, it was like 12-3 because C.J. Stroud could not get his offense into the end zone. And they've had a lot of I shouldn't say historically, a lot of slow starts this year, which is troublesome. Even against Notre Dame, it was a bit of a slow start. And if they don't change that real soon, I think they're going to get steamrolled by Michigan. You can't come out and start slow against Michigan because Michigan's going to pound them. But as far as Stroud's concerned, the way Bryce Young is not reliant on great receivers, it seems to me that C.J. Stroud is reliant on those great receivers, and he doesn't use all his weapons. He's shown some improvement in the short and intermediate passing game, but not as much as I hope. We got what we saw last year from Bryce Young plus some. I don't know that, in my opinion anyway, I've gotten the progress in the development of C.J. Stroud's game that I wanted. I have definitely not seen enough to put him as QB number one, because as Croc said, in my opinion, Bryce Young far and away is QB number one as we head towards the 2023 NFL draft.
I also think that Ohio State offense schemes stuff up for him that's wide open. Like, it makes stuff easy on him. You see Bryce Young do more. Look, I'm not taking anything away from C.J. Stroud. I know some of us have, Dwayne Haskins, PTSD of how he didn't work out coming out of there. But I just think that the scheme helps the quarterback there. And I think a lot of it is kind of created for him too.
All I can say is I go back to when I was there last year against Oregon, and there were receivers, specifically Chris Olave, who were wide open all over the field, and C.J. Stroud never saw him. And, that is a concern. I think sometimes it's the fault of the Ohio State coaching staff because they kind of overcoach him. He's looking to the sidelines too much rather than letting him play. I think that's a problem, but still have not seen the development from a guy who a lot of people before the season began said was going to be the first pick of the draft. I don't see it. I see a lot of potential in C.J. Stroud right now. I also see a lot of potential bust factor in him.
Yeah, I think as we're kind of looking at these guys and, how the process goes, you start to kind of nitpick, these guys to see what's the difference between this quarterback compared to this quarterback. And I'd say right now, and John, you kind of alluded to it, with Bryce Young, you see the timing, rhythm, NFL throws, tight windows, those type of things. I'm not seeing that with C.J. Stroud. Matter of fact, the accuracy more times than not, even with guys being open, is a little off, where he's throwing behind guys, he's missing guys completely. And then I'm like, well, maybe those are things that he can continue to work on. But his athleticism at the next level is not going to look the same. I think even right now, he's kind of struggling to run away from college guys. Yeah. I know he had the big run down the right sideline against Northwestern, but that was one of those things where it's just there. It's wide open, and you could just run, you could just go. Outside of that, he struggled a little bit to get away from guys in the pocket, kind of, to extend plays. So if you can't do it really against Northwestern, I mean, you dang sure ain't going to do it at the next level in the NFL, or if he plays against better competition, like maybe some SEC caliber of defensive linemen. So he has to improve more from the accuracy standpoint. I remember hearing Kyle Shanahan talk about what he looks for from these prospects. And he's like, man, I'm looking for guys, can they make those NFL throws over the middle? I think that's where he's missing a little bit. And he doesn't have anything else to really make it to where, like, okay, as I learn that, I can use this part of my game. I think he has to learn that.
Yeah, I mean, forget about, not being able to get away from guys in the NFL or even the SEC. Watch the Michigan game, because even though Aiden Hutchinson and Najab was not there, Michigan's got some real good edge rushers, and which is why I say if Ohio State doesn't come out of the box fast against Michigan, which is the game the Saturday after Thanksgiving, I'm concerned from a Ohio State parent point of view that Michigan's going to steamroll them.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. And guys, we talked about Bryce Young, but LSU came up with a huge victory. What a big win for that school. Defense did a great job. Who are some of the guys on the defensive side of the ball for LSU that you guys are kind of keeping an eye on? BJ Ojolari is one of them, brother to Aziz, who plays up here with the Giants. Either one of you guys can take it away if you want.
Well, obviously Ojolari, who made a lot of nice plays against the run Saturday night. He's not just a pass rusher. The other guy that a lot of people really like is Jaquelin Roy. Jaquelin Roy. I keep remembering, that video AA run. Jaquelin Roy, the nose tackle there, who is a big, explosive guy. He's made a lot of good plays. Ali Gay came back from his injury last year. He's a solid pass rusher, sort of a taller, thin guy who's got to put some beef on the bones. But those three guys, that defensive front, with not only Ojolari, but Jaquelin Roy and Ali Gay, I think is really what drives that not only drives that LSU defense, but you're looking at next level prospects, guys that are going to be playing on Sunday.
I think for me, and I assume these guys draft eligible, but I'm not sure. There's always that one like LSU player who on the back end is like, hey, by the way, I am draftable, even if I'm not a first round or day one or even day two type pick. But Jared Bernard-Converse, he made a couple of big plays down the stretch in that game. One, a deep ball down the left sideline, did a terrific job breaking that ball up. Had another play in the end zone, knocking the ball away as well in the clutch. So that was one guy I kind of wanted to talk about some of his contributions to that win.
Yeah, Bernard-Converse is probably a late round pick, a 7th round pick. If he runs well, if he tests well, may be able to move into the mid part of day 3. I forgot about Mickey Gardner, who's actually playing very well this year. Mickey Gardner was the guy, was a terrific cornerback at Louisiana Lafayette last year. When his coach, Billy Napier, went to Florida, people thought he was going to transfer to Florida. He surprised people by transferring to LSU. He's played very well. Scouts were concerned about his urgency. They said, he's a good athlete who plays on occasion. He has really stepped it up. Mickey Gardner could be a day 2 selection. They got some other guys, as Croc was talking about. Jay Ward is a solid safety. Micah Baskerville is a real good linebacker. These are guys that can fit into the late part of the draft. Have a next level future. They'll definitely be in a camp. And I think, these guys like the entire LSU offense really showing a lot of progress. The whole LSU team, I should say, I apologize, really showing a lot of progress throughout the season.
I know Brian Kelly's been a kind of a punching bag for everybody because of the video with like the spinning recruit and, and his fake accent, all that stuff. Yeah. Thank you, Croc. If you're watching our video, he's got it.
Are we going to talk about Jane Daniels at all?
Yeah.
Go ahead, man.
Listen,
I was going to go there.
I got to hold it down for the West Coast guys. This is a guy I watched him in high school in the state championship game. Watched a lot of his games at Arizona State, especially when I was evaluating Brandon Ayuk coming out of there and Darby and some of the throws he was able to make. And we saw how it started off at LSU for him. I was very intrigued once he transferred there. I'm like, okay, let's see it. And it started off a little rocky. And I think he leaned a little bit too much on his legs. And I think he's still leaning a little bit too much on his legs, right? Like he's not this big guy. He had 18 carries against Alabama. You don't want to see quite that. You want to see him win a little bit more as a passer. But I will say this, whatever it took to beat Alabama, he did that. Yeah. And when it came down to it, with having to make some throws, he did that. That corner route in the end zone, perfect location to his big slot or tight end or pass catcher. Then you watch on that last play. I mean, it was ballsy doing a sprint out to the right, and he couldn't miss. If you threw a little bit too far inside, it gets broken up. If you throw it a little bit too far outside, that's going out of bounds. And he did a terrific job of keeping that in play, delivering an accurate, catchable ball. So, we talked about how Bryce Young did not lose the game. I think Jaden Daniels did everything for his team to actually win the game.
Showing a lot more confidence. I mean, as a freshman at Arizona State, Jaden Daniels showed flashes of being a big-time NFL prospect. Never really developed at Arizona State, although we saw the problems that Arizona State had. Prior to the 2021 season, they fired a host of assistant coaches because of recruiting violations. You saw this year, basically, Herm Edwards got fired on the field after they lost to Eastern Michigan. The video went viral. Although Jaden Daniels, wasn't there was talk he was going to enter the draft after the 2021 season, even though he didn't play well. You can see the confidence building. What I suggest is, when you go back, or if you can go back and watch the game again, or at least watch overtime, watch the play, watch what goes on in the huddle before he takes that ball and sprints down the right-hand side into the end zone, that first play that LSU had in overtime, he's almost laughing. I mean, he's smiling. You could see his body language was just incredible. And I knew they were going to get the ball in the end zone. I didn't know he was going to take it and run it to 25 yards that first play, but you could tell he's starting to develop confidence. He still has a ways to go as a passer. And I absolutely agree with Croc. Jaden Daniels, like a host of other quarterbacks, relying too much on their legs, to make plays, which they can't do in the NFL. But the objective now is not to be an NFL quarterback. The objective now is to win football games. Well, although you want to see Jaden Daniels do it more with his arm, needs to improve some of his pass placement, really needs to learn to become a passer. But the fact is Jaden Daniels looks much better now, much more comfortable now than he did at the beginning of the year when LSU, everybody had written them off.
So Tony,
I think a lot of these guys, because of the COVID year, they have like that extra year. And I would love to see him take that. I would love to see him just stay one more year, really focus in on just being a better passer, being able to consistently win from the pocket and not have to rely on your legs so much. Because again, almost like Bryce Young, these guys are built kind of frail right now. Some of these guys coming out, not a big, bulky guy. So man, learn to win from the pocket. The pocket is your friend. Throw the ball, be accurate, be on time. And that has been very hit and miss, but definitely more of a playmaker right now. And we saw what Justin Fields, right? Watch Justin Fields against the Miami Dolphins.
Well, he looked awesome, by the way.
He won that game with his legs. Now, Justin Fields ran a 4.4, and he's 6'3", 230 pounds. That's not Jaden Daniels build. So it's like you don't want to rely on having to win that way. So yeah, man, please stay just one more year and focus in more at just being a pure passer. And I think that'll really help his draft stock.
Yeah, Justin Fields had some Cam Newton vibes in that game against the Dolphins yesterday. Boy, he played a hell of a game. Tony, if he comes out Daniels this year, what are we thinking? Like late day 3 developmental guy? And do you think someone will get in his ear and convince him to do the right thing to stay?
I'd be surprised if he stays. I think Brian Kelly is really going to have to re-recruit him because, college coaches these days, it's not just about recruiting freshmen, high school seniors. It's about re-recruiting your guys to stay. I know that, there was a lot of family input and the family is tending towards having him enter the draft. I think Brian Kelly is going to really have to make a push as to where he goes. I think you're probably looking more middle day 3 if he goes and say he gets an invite because he's graduated to the Senior Bowl or postseason game, has a good combine. He could jump into the 4th round area because remember, you got to look at a guy's whole body of work and you go back to the freshman season at Arizona State, all the promise he showed. Some coach is going to say, listen, he played better in 2022 than he had the prior 2 years. He had the outstanding freshman season. We're going to coach him to be an outstanding, to be an NFL quarterback. So I would say more middle day 3 than late round pick right now.
All right.
Assuming everything checks out, he tests well, he interviews well, he throws well at the combine.
Of course. We didn't mention the Alabama defense much. We talked about Will Anderson a lot on this podcast. Any other Alabama defenders that you guys want to, throw out there at all that you've been noticing? I don't think we've talked much more about any other guys on that side for them besides Anderson.
202, the linebacker, the transfer from Tennessee. Thought he did some good things. They highlighted him a couple of times, setting the edge in the run game. I mean, this is a guy who's more of a middle linebacker, but playing out there on the edge, setting it, and really chasing down the ball carrier, doing things like that. So kind of just wanted to talk about him a little bit because I think that's a name that's going to pop up a lot come draft time.
Brian Branch is going to be the next great safety to come out of Alabama. I had him graded as a 2nd, 3rd round pick before the season started. He's very athletic. He's developing an outstanding game. I could see him going early 2nd round. I could even see him going late 1st round. He is really turning in. He's an explosive guy who makes a lot of wild plays. He's much better this year than he was a year ago. And scouts have been taught. I had a conversation with somebody this weekend about him after the game Saturday night. Brian Branch is really the safety. He plays a star position, which means he's all over the place. He's really got to watch on that Alabama defense.
All right, let's go to the other game. Georgia, I think, put the hammer down and said, no. Still the class of the SEC. We're Georgia. They kind of shut down Tennessee. Let's talk about some Georgia defenders here. I know, a couple of the big guys, Jalen Carter. A lot of people like Keely Ringo. Your guys' thought on either those two or any other Georgia defenders you want to throw out there? Why don't we start with you, Croc?
Yeah, I want to start with a young defender by the name of Javon Bullard, man. And oh my goodness, coming off of the edge. I was waiting to see when Hendon Hooker was going to identify this guy, kind of showing pressure late, but multiple sacks, multiple tackles for losses, had a pass breakup in coverage. But he looks to be that like legit slot defender. I know the NFL likes to make some of these outside guys, guys that play outside in college, okay, we're going to make you play nickel in the NFL because you're a little undersized. Well, he's coming in ready to go right now. He is undersized, but man, you saw the twitch, you saw the suddenness, you saw the hips, the flips, and the timing of the blitzes was great. I remember being with Rex Ryan and Rex talking about when to blitz, like when to time it up, not showing it too soon, coming from depth. At what point on the play clock do you start to go down there? And I think whatever Bullard was doing, he was on the money. Hendon Hooker just never saw it coming, and he did a terrific job being scrappy in the box.
I think I want to just take it from an overview. And back in the 1990s, when the Miami Hurricanes were putting 5-6 players in the first round, the Florida State Seminoles were playing 4 or 5 players in the first round. We used to say the Miami Hurricanes have an NFL defense. The Florida State Seminoles have an NFL defense. When I watched that game Saturday with Georgia, I saw an NFL defense. I saw a team that if they had a week to prepare, say for the Carolina Panthers or even the Houston Texans, I fully believe that they would acquit themselves well. They wouldn't be as dominant, but they wouldn't embarrass themselves either. I've never seen team speed like that as I did Saturday against Tennessee. That team speed in that front seven, I mean, that's Usain Bolt type speed, the way those guys fly around the football, and they just explode plays. I've been a little cool on Jalen Carter. Showed me a lot on Saturday. They got a sophomore by the name of Samil Mondin, linebacker. He was outstanding. Keely Ringo, up and down, but for the most part was positive. It's everybody. I mean, you know, they had 4 defenders go in the first round last year, and it looks like they haven't missed a beat. I mean, it was just unbelievable to watch that team speed and watch the way, you know, Hendon Hooker look like the Bryce Young did against Tennessee. And what I mean by that is we talked about the Tennessee Alabama game and Bryce Young getting the snot beat out of him and having to pull himself off the ground, every other play. It was like that with Hendon Hooker on Saturday because of that Georgia defense is just so incredible. And they just replaced guys. It was amazing to watch.
We talk about Kelly Ringo, and, you know, you just mentioned some of the inconsistencies with him. And that's a little worrisome because at Georgia, well, how you don't have to worry about covering for a ton of time. Like your pass rush is getting there. Everybody's playing fast. You're moving quarterbacks off of their spots. Quarterbacks are worried about getting hit while throwing the ball. So he did a terrific job on the interception, being able to get in phase, got his head around, attack the ball at his highest point. But outside of that, I feel like there should be less inconsistencies with him in coverage because of how good that pass rush is. So that's one thing I definitely, as I continue to watch him and evaluate him more as a prospect, you know, when the pass rush isn't getting there, and when I say not getting there, I mean, if it's more on par with the rest of college football and what those defensive backs deal with, what does he look like then? Because before that interception, I don't think he had a pass defense all year. No pass breakup, no interception, nothing. And I think that's pretty wild. That's a pretty wild stat for a team with such a great pass rush.
I'm having an old man moment, Tony. The first show we did this year, the edge player that I watched from last year that was really good, and we thought he'd break out. Was it Nolan Smith? I'm trying to remember his name.
Yeah, no, it was Nolan Smith. He's more of a linebacker, more of a 3-down linebacker, and he's kind of been, you know, he doesn't have great stats. He's not playing badly. It's more of a scheme thing, I believe, with him. But yeah, he has not really lit the world on fire because when you watch the 2021 film, that guy was unbelievable.
Yeah, he was great.
The 4 first rounders. I mean, this guy played as good, if not better than most of them. And he's been a little bit quiet this year. But again, I think with Georgia, it's the fact that, you know, they just reload. You know, they don't need him to play, you know, lights out. You know, it's just as much a lot of times playing disciplined assignment football as it is, you know, just playing like your hair's on fire and rushing up the field to try and kill the opposing quarterback.
Should we have a conversation about Stetson Bennett, NFL quarterback? Croc?
I'm curious to know when that conversation is going to be had because he goes out there and he plays winning football. We talk about being a playmaker, right, with Jaden Daniels and some of these other guys. Well, Stetson Bennett said, you know what, I can do that too. Got out of there, made guys miss in the open field, outran guys to the end zone. We see him do that several times this year. Again, not a guy who's going to win like that consistently, but he can give you that nice little ad lib. He's making all the throws. Guys, he did have guys running wide open in this game, but he was hitting those guys. Hendon Hooker missed early on, overshooting Jalen Hyatt. We've seen that several times, even going back to the Alabama game. You don't see Stetson Bennett miss those type of passes. I think because of maybe not the biggest of arm, he's going to be viewed as more of a, day 3 type guy, maybe early day 3 and whatnot. We'll see. But, I just watched Taylor Heineke against the Minnesota Vikings. They look like a very similar type player, but I'm wondering, what else does he have to do to get a little bit more respect as a prospect? Because some of the guys that we do like, maybe they have more upside, but I think he's doing a lot of things extremely well.
Well, I don't want to call him a poor man's Stetson Bennett. I don't mean to be offensive here, but poor man's Bryce Young. I don't mean to be offensive, but maybe he's an impoverished man's Bryce Young in the sense that he's small, he doesn't have a big arm, but he wins. And I think that the comparison to Tyler Heineke is great, because I remember Heineke that year at the Shrine game, and Heineke has, done a great job, going from team to team to team, being a backup quarterback. And if Stetson Bennett is drafted, I think it's going to be very late in the draft, and he could have a nice career at the next level as sort of that third quarterback, that extra pair of eyes on the field, a guy who basically, has something to say, something constructive to say in the quarterback meetings. But do I look at Stetson Bennett as a mid-round pick that could be a starting quarterback on a consistent basis on Sunday and lead a team to 10, 11 wins? I don't. I don't. I think he's a real good college quarterback. It's a great story. He's exceeded expectations. I just don't project him all that well to the next level.
I'll throw Colt McCoy out there maybe as another comp, guys. What do you think? Colt McCoy is a comp? Smaller
guy?
I
can see that.
I think he's a little bit better than Colt McCoy, but yeah, okay. I mean, similar build, similar, average arm strength, and it gets it done between the ears.
Go ahead, Croc.
And I like his story, right? We're talking about a guy who was at Georgia as a walk-on, transferred to a junior college, earned a scholarship, went back, had to have multiple guys get hurt for him to get an opportunity, beat out JT Daniels, who I remember watching him last year, and he in one game he had 5 attempts, 5 touchdowns. He's stretching the field. And I'm like, man, what are people going to give this guy a chance? And all my responses were, oh, he's terrible. He can't compete in the SEC. He's bad. So not only can he compete in the SEC, he went on to win a national title, and we see what he's doing right now. He's not the weak link. Now, there has been a little bit of up and down in his play as well. But when you see him on that big stage against Tennessee and some of the things he was doing, I think that was big time, man. He made throw after throw.
Against Alabama last year in the national title game. You know, I mean, look at that. And there was, even after they won the national title, there was questions as to what he was going to do. Was he going to enter the draft? Was he going to come back? If he came back, was he going to get the job? He's come back, and he's, solidified himself as the number one quarterback for the number one team in the nation.
All right, let's go to the other big game, Clemson, Notre Dame. Notre Dame slowly turning around their season, guys. And Tony, you made this point. Clemson's offense is just doing them no favors right now.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, you look at possession of time. I think Notre Dame had 6 more minutes possession of time. The Clemson defense was on the field. They got pushed up and down the field by the Notre Dame offense, Notre Dame offensive line. I mean, they ran the ball. And you look at, DJ Ugalele, and it's kind of ironic in the sense that it was 2 years ago during the COVID season when Trevor Lawrence tested positive for COVID, and Ugalele made his debut on the road against Notre Dame in a nationally televised game, and he was phenomenal. I mean, you said, wow, once Trevor Lawrence goes on the NFL, this is going to be the guy for Clemson, and Clemson's not just going to not miss a beat. And he played 2 games like that. Hasn't worked out. I mean, he was inconsistent last year. He's not been good this year. He was benched against Syracuse. They brought in the kid Klubnik against Syracuse, who brought Clemson back to win the game. Ugalele got benched again on Saturday because of poor play. You got to wonder, forget about his NFL future. What's his future at Clemson going to be? Is he going to enter the transfer portal? I mean, it hasn't even really been inconsistent. It's just been not good for him. And I think in turn, it hurt Clemson because they couldn't move the ball. The defense was always on the field. And Notre Dame, the offensive line of Notre Dame historically has always had good offensive lines, like the Michigans, like the Wisconsin, just pounded and pushed that very talented defensive line up and down the field Saturday night.
There was a time during this year where I thought, you know what, DJ, you're taking the necessary steps. Start off a little slow, and wasn't anything special. See him missing throws, and he started to kind of settle in. Then he had some big games, had the huge game against Wake Forest. I said, okay, man, maybe this is the time he starts to take that next step. Then I think the next game is like, okay, he played well again. Can you keep it going? And then he started going back down. And I think just the fact that nobody knows what they're going to get. We see the traits. Like, those are through the roof, whether it's his arm strength, his ability to make all the throws on the field, definitely plus athleticism. And I think for a guy who's so big, you don't really think about his athleticism, but, he'll take off. He'll make guys miss. He had a nice play against Notre Dame where took off up the middle, made a guy miss, dove for the end zone. I think it was like a yard short, but you see all this ability and upside, and there's just something missing. And I don't know if it's maybe, his film study, taking those so he can play with a little bit more anticipation. Is that something that's missing? But erratic as a passer, continues to get benched, which is wild, especially when his coach says, man, this was our biggest recruit, even bigger than like Trevor Lawrence. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a wild statement. But now, it looks like they might go to the backup quarterback a little bit more. Two times in a row, they're trying to say DJ's their guy, right? He comes out, oh no, he's our guy, he's our leader. We needed a jump start. We needed a spark. Like, who needs a spark from their starting guy? So not a great situation for him. And I'd be surprised if you see him playing for Clemson again. And I don't think you'll see him in the NFL next year.
Yeah, I mean, just go back to what we said about Jaden Daniels, how Jaden Daniels, he's getting his mojo on. He's showing some confidence. Like I said, that touchdown he scored in overtime, you could see in the huddle before the ball was even snapped, he knew it was going to happen. You don't see that with Ugalele, and it's been inconsistent to poor. There have been flashes, but again, I mean, the best football he played was 2 years ago when he stepped in for Trevor Lawrence, and he got everybody. I know he got me excited, and he's never been able to capitalize on that.
All right, let's go to the defensive side of the ball for Clemson, guys. Still some good players on that end. Anyone's been jumping out to you? I know they maybe had 3 top 15 guys on defense to start the year. Or are they still in that neighborhood, Tone?
I liked Hyler Davis, although the defensive tackle, though I think he's more of a 3rd round pick, more of your 3 technique type of guy. I think Myles Murphy is a guy who's got to get bigger. He's got to get stronger. He's a very athletic pass rusher. But the fact is, if you watch the game, he was getting obliterated at the point of attack on running downs. He was getting taken out of the game by tight ends, although Notre Dame's got some darn good tight ends, NFL tight ends who got.
We'll talk about him too.
Well, a couple of them. He was getting knocked out of the game, knocked out of the play by pulling guards. He was getting handled by tackles. Saturday, even though the defense for Clemson was on the field consistently and way too long, he looked like he was a liability against the run. And I think that's something that scouts are going to be looking at if Murphy enters the draft. And that may be a concern. That may be your red flag. I still like him. He's got upside, but that's one part of his game he's got to, he's got to improve. Brian Brise, great player. Just going to give him a pass for what's going on in his personal life the past month. If he has his ups and downs, it's very understandable, but we know he's going to be an outstanding player.
For the fans that don't know, Tony, why don't you just let the fans know what you're referencing there?
Well, I believe he had a 15-year-old sister who died of, I believe it was a brain cancer, and he missed one game and then he came back. And I mean, that's going to knock anybody for a loop. So with that sort of situation, you got to give the guy a pass, as you would hope, give any person a pass.
Of course.
But he's shown himself to be a one-man wrecking crew on the interior defensive line in the past, and that he's got that ability.
Croc, anyone on Clemson you want to highlight?
Not even so much Clemson. I think the star of the show on the defense was Benjamin Morrison, the freshman cornerback for Notre Dame.
Yeah, go ahead,
2 interceptions,
man.
1 pick six. He made terrific plays. Like, that's what you call going. I watched the game between the Buffalo Bills and New York Jets on Sunday, and you see some of these interceptions Josh Allen's throwing. It's like, dude, who are you throwing to, right? And you see guys, and on the stat sheet it says interception, but it was more Josh Allen than anything else. When you watch Benjamin Morrison, man, he went out there and he went and got it. I mean, whether it was the diving interception, the pick six, he was on the same page as the quarterback as opposed to the receiver. It was a back shoulder throw. Not only did he intercept it with great anticipation, but then how he raced down the sideline and ran it back like 90 yards for a touchdown. So not draft eligible. We'll probably be talking about him in a couple of years, but it looks like they might have a good young cornerback.
Tony, you mentioned Michael Mayer and a couple other Notre Dame tight ends. Anyone from the Fighting Irish that you want to point out for fans?
Well, I think Brandon Joseph, the transfer from Northwestern, has had his moments this year. He's a good athlete. He's got excellent size, solid, not great against the pass, but he's forceful. They also have another corner there by the name of Cam Hart, who's a senior, who I think is underrated, gets overlooked, but he's done a solid job. And you're looking at a day 3 pick next year.
Very good. All right, Tony, this is a game you said, I want to make sure I talk about this, Schmelke. So here we go. App State, Coastal Carolina. What do you got?
There you go. A huge game in the Sun Belt. And, we talk about the Bryce Youngs. We talk about the CJ Strouds, the Will Levises. The Coastal Carolina has an outstanding quarterback by the name of Grayson McCall. He's Bryce Young-like in the sense that he's not a big body. He's got a decent arm. I think his arm is probably slightly better than Bryce Young. All the guy does is produce. All the guy does is find ways to come through for Coastal Carolina. This was supposed to be a big game. It was tight in the middle of the game. And then Grayson McCall took over and just led the team down the field. He's been doing it with a couple of different receivers. We all remember Isaiah Likely, who was his top tight end. He helped make Isaiah Likely a star last year, if you will. But Grayson McCall, who's a third-year junior from Coastal Carolina, I know everybody, Coastal Carolina, it's on the way to Myrtle Beach. They beat BYU 2 years ago, beat Zach Wilson a couple of years ago in a game that was put together at the last minute. They got, they play in teal uniforms. But Grayson McCall is a legitimate next-level prospect. I right now have him as a third-round pick, and he's one of those guys, not the biggest guy, but he gets it between the ears. And just like Bryce Young, understands what's going on, uses all his weapons, uses all his targets, sees the field. Granted, it's the Sun Belt. It's not the SEC. But, you deal with the cards that you dealt, and Grayson McCall for 3 years now has been a real good quarterback. And he did it against App State, who beat Texas A&M. I know they've had their problems in the middle portion of the season, but he came through big time for him. Again, for the Chanticleers of Coastal Carolina, who are going to be in the postseason again. They're going to be playing for the Sun Belt Championship again, likely.
Hey, Tony, they have a cornerback by the name of DeJordan Strong.
Yes. Super
senior. Have you watched him? I know he's there. I know he's somebody that people are taking note of, but I haven't watched him or done any film evaluation on him yet. How's he doing?
Slightly undersized in the sense that he's under 6 foot tall, explosive, tough. He was on the cusp of being draftable. I always thought that he's underrated. He's underrated in the sense that scouts that I spoke to said, he's a street free agent. He's not going to make the 80-man roster. I disagree. I think he's got dime back special teams written all over him. He's a little bit shorter, but he's well built. He's got a stout build. He's got a great burst to the ball out of his plant. He's a guy who's very physical, doesn't back down to a challenge. I want to see what his actual testing numbers are, but he's a guy who I feel, even if he isn't drafted and he's signed as a priority free agent, he's going to compete for that 8th defensive back special teams player on an NFL roster on Sunday. No doubt about it. I hope he gets drafted because I think he's ridiculously underrated, very consistent, always shows up to play, DeJordan Strong.
All right, one other thing we wanted to do today, we thought would be fun, is look at some of the NFL rookies that are in the league this year and kind of evaluate, take a look at, kind of what we thought about them going into the draft last year, how they performed. We went a little longer on the college stuff than I thought. So why don't we stick on the offensive side of the ball for this podcast? We can save defense for maybe the next one. So let's start here, guys. The offensive tackles. It was a big story coming into the draft last year. We had 3 offensive tackles going round 1, or in the top 10 rather, in Neil Ekwonu and Charles Cross. And really, I think all 3 of those guys have done pretty well. Ekwonu had a rough start to the year. He's played better. Abraham Lucas, who was a 3rd-round pick, has started all year for Seattle. He's been fantastic. And even Tyler Smith, the guy that I thought was nowhere near ready to start offensive tackle in the NFL in year 1, he hasn't been great, but he's been fine. He hasn't killed the Cowboys offense. So I think early returns on this offensive tackle class, guys, has been very, very positive. And look, it's going to be a slow start. That's a tough position in the league. You're going to work into it. Look at Andrew Thomas with the Giants. It's taken 3 years for him to kind of meet his potential. So give these guys time, but I think what they've always shown early in the year makes you think they're going to be long-term starters at their positions. Croc, why don't we start with you?
Well, I've seen a lot of, Abraham Lucas and Cross, these guys over with the Seattle Seahawks. And Lucas has been really good. I was watching them last Sunday evening against the Arizona Cardinals. trying to see, man, which team is going to pull this off so the 49ers can kind of, they're jockeying for position. But it was the Seahawks, and they've been doing a terrific job. You look at Geno Smith, he's playing some of his best football that he's played, and offensive line has been a tough position for the Seattle Seahawks to get right. And these guys definitely aren't the issue at all. And I think they are definitely contributing to how well the offense is playing and Geno Smith being as comfortable as he is. Abraham Lucas out of Washington State, I had questions with how he'd handle speed with coming out, but I think he's been tremendous, as you mentioned.
Yeah. You knew that Seattle was going to have to go through a rebuild. It was whether or not they were going to do it sooner rather than later. They didn't do it in 2021. They pulled the trigger last year, this past year, I should say, right before the draft and trading Russell Wilson. So basically, in return for Russell Wilson, they got a potential franchise left tackle. And Charles Cross is not just doing it physically. I mean, he's played smart, heads up football that has helped Seattle win. He's doing much better than I ever thought, because when you watch him at Mississippi State, he was constantly lining up in a 2-point stance. It was primarily an aerial attack. He has really come along much quicker than I thought. So good on him. As far as Abraham Lucas is concerned, I've always loved Abraham Lucas, and I thought that he was underrated. I had him as a 3rd-round pick. I agree with Croc when you said, you're concerned about handling speed rushers, but what he does great is use his body position. He does a great job using angles to shut those guys down. I mean, Seattle, who historically has questionable drafts, and you never knew what they were doing. This year, you had a good idea where they were going to go. They did it on the offensive line. And now, they got 2 major pieces at those bookend tackles moving forward. So things should be much easier for them when they eventually get their quarterback. If that quarterback happens to be a guy other than Geno Smith, who has really shown a lot of ability, really shown come to fruition, which I'm very happy for, because if you remember, had a lot of problems with the Jets, never was able to solidify himself, but he's someone who is really matured as a person from the day he was drafted till now. So good for Geno Smith.
That's an underrated aspect of kind of Geno Smith coming to what he is today. And, I was there in 2013 when he got drafted, and, we'd hang out sometimes in the hotel and whatnot, as most rookies are kind of hanging around the building. And, as it pertains to kind of, immaturity and things like that, guys coming in like young, he thought he should have been drafted higher, right? Remember, he was upset. He lasted to the 2nd round. And I think there was a lot of pressure that was on him from, just being in New York, playing in that market there. And they didn't have enough around him to do better. I mean, I think his best weapon, maybe Jeremy Curley, but then there was like Clyde Gates. He had to lean on guys like that. And he had some veterans that ended up retiring or not doing well. Braden Edwards was one of them. So, he had a lot working against him at that time. And, to kind of, the falling out in that situation, kind of bouncing around the league. I think the best thing for him was probably being behind Russell Wilson for a couple of years and really seeing what it takes to be a professional, how you carry yourself, how you prepare. And then now we're seeing the best version of Geno Smith right now. And, he's in his 30s, but it almost feels like he's just getting started. And he has about 3-4 more years of potentially being able to play at this level.
He was behind Eli Manning for a year too. So he I'm sorry, Tom, real quick. He was behind Eli Manning for a year, and there was another veteran quarterback in the AFC he was behind for a year too. So yeah, he's had some great tutors, Croc, no doubt. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, and if you remember, Croc, I mean, he basically blamed his agency for him not being selected in the 1st round because he said they told him to stay out of not to go to the Senior Bowl and not to participate in the Senior Bowl. And the day after he was selected in the 2nd round, he fired his agency. But then if you remember with the Jets, there was an incident on a plane with a stewardess where he was totally innocent. And he could have made a big deal about it. He just put his head down and moved forward. There was that incident in the jet locker room where he got punched in the face, got punched in the jaw, and he was on the sideline for 6 weeks. And he was solid as a rookie with the New York Jets. But as the New York Jets have shown, they never really developed him, and he bounced around. That's why I say good for him, because he's shown himself to be a mature person. And it's, he's an easy guy to beat up on, but when you really see what he's gone through and what he's done, he's also a very easy guy to root for.
I like how you said they tried to write me off, but I am right back. And that's like the line of the year for me. That was good. It was good to hear. I'm happy for him.
Yeah, me too. And by the way, he was also got put in the impossible situation of the guy that had to start to break Eli Manning's starting streak. And that, I mean, for the people that don't live in New York that are listening to this, that was a huge deal. I mean, it was like DEFCON 3 in this building. It was a mess. And he handled that really really professionally and well, and he didn't play that well in the game he started, but in terms of handling all the off the field stuff that came with it, he also handled that extremely well too.
Well, not just that situation. I mean, you talk about, coming in for Eli Manning for a game. I think the biggest part of that was breaking the streak, but having to start in place of Russell Wilson, who had been there for a decade, and all the highs that he had and how well he played, and everyone thinking, oh man, again, like Tony said, it's a total rebuild and they're blowing everything up. And with them blowing it up, they found somebody that can kind of steady the ship and keep everything, going well. And I think that's probably the biggest accomplishment that he's had so far. Like, just that was not, this was, they were unanimously one of the worst teams in the NFL heading into the season. Like, that's what everyone thought. And right now they're sitting up top of the NFC West, a division that a lot of people thought would be a little bit more competitive.
Yeah. And by the way, just to throw it out there, since we're on the Seahawks, a big reason, guys, is because of their draft. And Tony, you mentioned it. Yeah. Their drafts have kind of been messy. They drafted the big defensive lineman at TCU in the first round a couple of years ago. That hasn't worked out. I can't remember his name. He was one of those tweener tackle defensive end guys.
Well, what they did was they could care less about best player available. They would always take the player that best fit their system.
Yeah.
So what would happen is, they would bypass all these really good players for guys that they thought would fit their system. And it came home to roost because, people would look back and say, well, you passed up on this player, and you took, someone that should have gone in the third round, in the first round, and they consistently did that. But they had Russell Wilson, and they had a lot of receivers, and they had some, they had some guys that were, still the linebacker from Utah State that was there that was so dominant for so long, that was able to carry that team.
Bobby Wagner.
Yeah, there you go, Bobby Wagner. Thank you. And what happens is when it falls off, when it goes downhill, it kind of falls off a cliff because you've got aging veterans that are either retiring or trading away, and then you missed on all those draft picks. So that's what happened there.
Yeah, and LJ Collier was a guy I was thinking of, Tony. They got picked 29th. But just look at this. Their two starting offensive tackles, guys, draft picks. Two of their three starting cornerbacks, draft picks. Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, both day 3 picks they're starting. Throwing Kenneth Walker III, who might end up being the offensive rookie of the year, depending how the rest of the season goes. And then Boye Maffe's barely played, and I think we all liked him coming out too. So really, they talk about it was going to be a long-term rebuild. They've accelerated that with one hell of a draft class.
Yeah.
Important positions, cornerback and offensive tackle. Those are critical positions. Yeah. Everybody talks about the quarterback position, but and everybody needs the quarterback. But when you talk to NFL people, they're looking for offensive tackles. They're looking for pass rushers. They're looking for cornerbacks in the draft. And they've got 4 players, one of which is a potential franchise left tackle. The other guy that looks like he's going to be a starter at right tackle for years. And the cornerbacks you mentioned, they not only did it, but they did it at critical positions.
No question. All right, let's go to running backs. I mentioned Kenneth Walker, so let's stick there. He's looked great. Breece Hall looked great before he tore his ACL, the poor kid. And Dameon Pierce, who, you got to wonder why the hell they didn't give that kid the ball more in college. He was getting like 8 carries a game. He's unbelievable for Houston. Croc, this running back class has been fantastic.
It's been really good. And the crazy thing is everyone said that the 2023 class is supposed to be even better, but they have been the 2022 class, very good, very productive, strong runners. You look at Pierce, they are leaning on Pierce to do everything in that offense, really kind of carry the offense and at the very least keep them competitive. And if you watch a lot of the Houston Texans games, they're losing kind of in the second half because they just don't have enough, but they definitely can't blame Pierce. He's been everything they ever would have wished he would be and more. You look at Walker for Seattle. They're leaning on him a lot as well. Who closed out that game against the Arizona Cardinals Sunday evening?
26 carries.
Yeah. I mean, him down the stretch being strong, running near the goal line. So he's been doing a really good job, and he's showing some of that elusiveness. He's showing strong running. He's showing speed. They're trying to get the ball to him a little bit as a pass catcher. So, I've liked a lot of what he's done. And it is really sad to see Breece Hall, the injury that he sustained, because look at the New York Jets right now, where they 5-3. And a big part of that was Breece Hall, again, keeping them competitive in games, being able to lean on him in the passing game, in the running game. And they're still trying to piece it together. They have some strong play from some of their rookie guys, maybe a guy like Sauce Gardner. But yeah, the
Ooh, he's
running back
playing well
class, I
too.
think,
Ooh.
doing well. I'm waiting for the 49ers to utilize Ty Davis Price a little bit.
You know, listen, I said after the draft on this show and other interviews that I did that when you looked at the New York Jets draft, it had the potential to be a transformational draft, a draft that 2 or 3 years down the road, you say, wow, this draft really turned the team around, as John was just talking about with the Seattle Seahawks. Jets aren't going to have to wait 2 or 3 years. I mean, you look at a guy like Breece Hall, and it's sad that, you know, he went down with the injury, and it's a pretty significant injury. It's an ACL and a meniscus, and I've talked to a lot of people and say that is a very tough injury for running backs to come to return from.
I didn't realize he had a meniscus too, Tony. It was both.
That's what I was told. That's what I was told. But you know, I've watched a lot of New York Jets football, and I got to tell you, Breece Hall, up until the injury, was the best Jets running back I had seen since Curtis Martin. He just had the penchant where he looked like he'd be stopped for a 3 or 4 yard gainer, and then he'd find the hole and he'd shoot through it, and that 3 or 4 yard gainer would be a 6 or 7 yard gainer. Consistently, he did it. He was a good pass catcher out of the backfield. He did a terrific job with his blocking assignments. So really, you know, at the top of round 2, where the Jets traded in front of the Houston Texans to make sure that they could get Breece Hall, Jets hit a home run with that pick, and Jets won a real good game this weekend against the Buffalo Bills, where they got the running game, you know, going again with Michael Carter and James Robinson. But you look at the week after Breece Hall went down, you know, the running game was okay. They didn't have Breece Hall. Zach Wilson throws 3 interceptions against a very average New England Patriots defense. And the concerns there at that point in time was, well, you know, they leaned on Breece Hall so much in the early part of the season. You know, what are we going to do? What are the Jets going to do moving forward? We'll see what after that terrific win against the Buffalo Bills. But Breece Hall was outstanding. He was everything he cropped up to be. I said about Breece Hall, he's a first-round talent that will go in the second round. And I think down the road, there may be some teams that, you know, may have needed a running back to put him over the top, are going to be very disappointed they didn't select him.
And just to throw it out there, too, the big question on Kenneth Walker, the third coming out, was, could he be a factor in the pass game, right? Could he catch it? Could he pass pro? Because he wasn't really asked to do that in Michigan State. And he's been good enough. I think they've been very happy with what he's been able to do in that area. He's been on the field on third down for them a bit. All right, let's jump over to, let's do quarterback. There's only really one guy. I guess 2 now, because Malik Willis has started a couple of games. And I think we nailed Malik Willis, guys. I mean, you know, he flashes, but long way to go as a passer. And I know Kenny Pickett's had a rough start. He's thrown some interceptions. I almost like his irrational confidence. Like he just
some interceptions. I think he like leads the league. I mean, he's throwing a lot of interceptions.
No question. But I almost like the irrational confidence where he sees a small window and he tries to make the throw. I think a lot of times rookies will be a little too conservative and just be check down Charlies. At least he's trying to make these throws, which I'll tip my cat. And maybe he's not talented enough to ever make those throws. I'm going to find out that he's just going to be a backup. But at least I like him going out there and at least trying to make those type of plays, Croc.
Yeah, you know, he's trying to, you know, push the issue, force the issue. I think right now, especially as a rookie, you want to figure out what you can and can't get away with at the NFL level. You know, Pittsburgh, they didn't play against, you know, top tier talent week in, week out for him to really be challenged in that way. And obviously we know the passing windows shrink even more at the NFL level. I do think that he has a lot of weapons. I like that he's able to lean on his running back, Najee Harris, back there. The offense definitely has been a little up and down, and losing a guy like Chase Claypool, a guy who in theory, you know, kind of makes your room for error a little bit larger because he's a big body. You lose that. He's going to another team. Maybe seeing how Pickett can grow with George Pickens. I think that's going to be something that's intriguing to watch for years to come. But right now, again, if you kind of take away the interceptions, which again, some of them not even his fault. There's like a Hail Mary, tip balls, etc. He's had some of those things, but just seeing right now where he's at and then how he's going to progress, I think he's shown some good things. Obviously, you want to see him continue to understand what he can and can't get away with.
Well, just as long as he learns from it, because it seems to me that he's trying to make throws on Sunday that he made on Saturday, and he can't make them on Sunday. So he's got to learn from it. He's also got to learn, I believe, to get rid of the ball a little bit quicker. 6 sacks against the Eagles, 2 sacks against the Miami Dolphins. So obviously it's a learning. It's going to be a steep curve. There's no doubt about it. You got it. You know, do you like his moxie? Yeah. Let's see what happens moving forward, because there are some quarterbacks, talked about the New York Jets before, Sam Darnold, who just never got out of that
right,
turning the ball over. And it's a problem. You look at the Jets quarterback now, Zach Wilson, that had been a problem until the Buffalo game. See what happens moving forward. He's got to be able to learn from it. And like you said, he's got good weapons to deliver the ball to or playing around them.
All right, finally, guys, let's get to the wide receivers. You mentioned, I think Pickett and Pickens do have a nice little connection. George Pickens has a nice start to his rookie year. And the other two receivers, Tony, your guy, Chris Olave, has emerged as the number one option in New Orleans. He's been great. And Garrett Wilson, who was my big guy coming out, I loved him. Boy, him and Zach Wilson really seemed to, Tony, to develop the connection pretty quickly too, huh?
Well, I said the Jets hit a home run with Breece Hall. They had an absolute grand slam with Garrett Wilson, because Garrett Wilson is something that they haven't had for decades, and that is a true number one receiver. Obviously, the talk, a lot of it started by myself, was that the Jets trading for Deebo Samuel before the draft. It's probably a good thing, because even though Deebo Samuel is a playmaker in a variety of ways, Garrett Wilson is a true number one receiver, and he has proven himself. And really, since he caught that game-winning or the go-ahead touchdown pass against Cleveland, his game has taken off. He wins out for the contested throws. He shows the ability to separate. He finds the open spot in the defense. He's also very good running after the catch, I think better than any of us had expected. So really, I mean, like I said, they hit a home run with Breece Hall. They hit a grand slam with Garrett Wilson. We haven't even talked about him on my garden. We'll talk about it next show. But Wilson has been absolutely phenomenal and has made life a lot easier for Zach Wilson. I don't think the Jets could have hoped for anything more than what they've seen from this guy the first half of the year.
Yeah, and if you look at some of the numbers that's going on there's been a lot of afterthoughts in the offense, including guys like Denzel Mims, and people thought, well, maybe there's Corey Davis or maybe Elijah Moore, and we've seen Elijah Moore and his frustrations he's had with the offense not getting the targets. But one guy who has consistently started to get the targets and is getting better and better, improving more and more, especially from a productive standpoint, is definitely Garrett Wilson. He's doing a terrific job.
You got to remember, Corey Davis has been injured the past 2 weeks, so it's been Garrett Wilson and Denzel Mims or a few other guys. Elijah Moore finally saw the field yesterday. So Davis hasn't been on the field because he's been injured, and Garrett Wilson has not missed a beat.
Yep.
Your thoughts, Croc, on any of the rookie wide receivers in the league that you want to kind of pick out or point out for us?
I think Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce is a guy that I was pretty high on, man. And I was saying, Green Bay Packers draft Alec Pierce. Like, I just felt like he was a Green Bay Packer and he'd hit the ground running with Aaron Rodgers, whether you drafted him high in the second round or whenever it was. Take him. I think he fits. Well, he's been a really good fit for the Indianapolis Colts, no matter who their quarterback is. And we've seen the quarterback change there. Matt Ryan was playing terrible. They went with the kid out of Texas, blanking on his name right now.
Ellinger.
Yeah, Sam Ellinger. And then they just fired their coach while we've been on air right now. So,
wait, did they really?
Right. Yeah, he's out. So a lot of turnovers going on there with the Indianapolis Colts. But one guy who has been consistent throughout this year, and I think he's continuing to improve his game and step it up, is Alec Pierce.
Just kind of bookend the show. We talked about C.J. Stroud and some of his struggles. And it's amazing because Chris Olave was the guy who was left out last year because of C.J. Stroud's inability to see the field. I mentioned the game against Oregon that I went to, and Chris Olave was open all day, and C.J. Stroud never saw him. Now Olave's in a system where, the quarterback looks around and he's playing like the top 10, 12 pick that I thought he deserved to be. One last thing, Frank Reich was fired, as Croc pointed out. I think that has to do as much to do with the general manager, who's never been able to figure out the quarterback position since Phillip Rivers left. It's been an open wound for the Indianapolis Colts, and I think I actually think Reich is a good coach. Somebody's going to get a good coach heading into 2023.
Heck, Tony, you could argue since Andrew Luck retired, right? I mean, you've had basically just a merry-go-round of quarterbacks since he had that unexpected retirement. So yeah, it's been tough, and they haven't been able to figure that out. Gentlemen, good stuff. Let's meet right after Thanksgiving weekend. That'll be rivalry weekend. We could talk Ohio State, Michigan, a lot of new games and stuff to talk about. So let's talk right at that Monday after Thanksgiving. All right, boys?
Sounds
Look
good.
forward to it. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a great November, everyone. Thanks for being with us on draft season. For Tony Pauline and Eric Crocker, I'm John Schmelko. It's all brought to you by Tommy Hilfiger, a PVH brand and an official partner of the New York Football Giants. We'll see you next time, everyone.